Let's be honest, depression doesn't usually show up out of nowhere. A lot of the time, it builds slowly, almost quietly, through habits and patterns you barely notice because they feel so normal. And that's actually one of the trickiest parts about it. The things that weigh you down can be the exact things you've gotten used to doing every day. Carl Jung spent a lot of time talking about how our inner world affects our outer experience. Not in a mystical way, but in a very practical, what you ignore eventually controls you kind of way. And when you look closely, some of the things you do automatically might be working against you more than you realize. This isn't about blame or fixing yourself. It's more about shining a light on the subtle habits that pile up and shape how you feel. Once you see them, you can actually do something about them. And honestly, that tiny bit of awareness can make a huge difference. So let's break down 5 everyday things you might be doing that quietly feed your depression, without you even noticing. The first thing is this: you ignore parts of yourself you don't want to deal with. Let's spell this out clearly, because it's one of the biggest things Jung talked about. A lot of your emotional weight comes from the parts of yourself you keep pushing aside. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because you're human, and it feels easier to avoid what's uncomfortable. These ignored parts can be really ordinary things, like a reaction you pretend didn't bother you because you don't want to seem sensitive, a habit you keep repeating even though you know it drains you, but you tell yourself, "It's fine, I've got it under control." A personal limitation you don't want to admit you have, so you keep forcing yourself past it even though it's burning you out. A past mistake that still quietly stings, but you act like it never mattered. A feeling of resentment or frustration you swallow because you think it's not a big deal, even though it keeps popping up in your thoughts. When these things go ignored, they don't disappear. They just move into the background, and that's exactly where they start causing trouble. Jung described this as letting the shadow take over, not in a dramatic sense, but in a slow, subtle way where you start feeling heavy, tired, or down without fully knowing why. Here's what that looks like in everyday life. You suddenly feel irritated for no clear reason. You notice a wave of sadness that doesn't match what's happening around you. You feel mentally foggy because you're carrying stuff you haven't acknowledged. You start reacting more strongly to small things because the ignored feelings pile up under the surface. You catch yourself feeling off or not like yourself, even on days that should be fine. It's sort of like having unfinished tasks in your mind. You may not see them, but you're still paying for them in energy. And the longer you keep pushing away these internal pieces, the more your mood sinks, because part of you is constantly trying to get your attention. Facing these parts isn't about blaming yourself or digging into everything at once. It's simply about noticing. A small moment of honesty, like saying, "Okay, I guess this did bother me," can immediately take some pressure off. Jung's whole point was that the things we refuse to recognize end up controlling us from the sidelines. But the moment you turn a light on them, they lose their grip. The second thing is this: you constantly compare yourself to other people. This one is sneaky because it feels so normal. You don't wake up and decide, "I'm going to compare myself all day." It just happens in tiny moments that add up. Jung emphasized that everyone has their own path, their own internal wiring, their own way of moving through the world. But when you start measuring your life against someone else's, you create a tension inside yourself that slowly chips away at your mood. And the comparisons don't even have to be dramatic. They can be simple, everyday things like seeing someone work faster and thinking, "Why can't I do that?" Watching someone stay calm in a situation and wondering why you react the way you do. Noticing how someone seems organized and immediately assuming you're behind. Hearing about someone's progress and feeling like you're not doing enough, even if you're actually doing fine. Looking at someone's routine or schedule and thinking yours doesn't measure up. None of this happens out loud. It's quiet, almost invisible. But every time you compare, you create this subtle pressure inside yourself. The feeling that you should be more, or faster, or stronger, or somehow better. Over time, this kind of mental self-checking drains you. It's like running a race where you're constantly looking sideways instead of forward. You lose your balance, and you lose your sense of direction. Here's how comparison slowly feeds depression. You start doubting your own progress. You overlook your strengths because you're too focused on someone else's. You feel behind even when nothing is actually wrong. You start thinking in terms of should instead of what realistically fits you. You pressure yourself into standards that have nothing to do with your personality, abilities, or priorities. Jung's idea here is simple. When you compare yourself, you disconnect from your own path. And when you disconnect, you lose clarity about who you are and what actually matters to you. That internal split can make you feel low, unmotivated, or like you're constantly failing, even when you're not. The goal isn't to stop noticing other people, it's to stop using them as a measuring stick for your own worth. When you shift the focus back to yourself, your pace, your progress, your strengths, you remove a huge amount of unnecessary weight from your mind. The third thing is this. You move through your life on autopilot without checking in with yourself. This one is so common that most people don't even notice they're doing it. You wake up, go through your routine, handle what needs to be handled, and by the end of the day you realize you didn't really pause, not even once, to ask yourself how you were actually feeling. Jung talked a lot about self-awareness, not as something dramatic, but as a basic way of staying connected to your inner world. When that connection fades, everything starts to feel dull or heavy, even if nothing bad is happening. Autopilot doesn't look dramatic. It looks ordinary, going through tasks just because they're part of your schedule, saying, "I'm fine," without even checking whether you are, feeling off, but brushing it aside because you don't have time to think about it. Pushing through your day even when you're mentally stretched thin. Realizing you haven't asked yourself a single personal question all day, not even a small one. When you do this day after day, you slowly drift away from your own needs. You might not notice it right away, but the disconnect builds, and eventually it shows up as feeling emotionally flat, losing interest in things you normally enjoy, having trouble focusing, feeling stuck or aimless, experiencing a low mood that doesn't seem to have a cause. Jung's point was that when you lose the habit of checking in with yourself, you lose your sense of direction. And when you lose direction, everything starts to feel heavier, because you're no longer operating from a place of clarity. You're just reacting. It's not about constantly analyzing yourself. It's about noticing yourself. Even simple check-ins help. Am I tired or overwhelmed? Do I need a break? Is something bothering me right now? Does my routine still work for me, or am I just doing it because it's familiar? What's one thing that would make today feel lighter? These small moments of honesty reconnect you with your inner world, and that connection alone can ease a lot of the emotional fog that autopilot creates. You don't have to overhaul your whole routine. You just have to stop disappearing inside it. The fourth thing is this. You bottle up what you really think and feel. This one hits a lot of people harder than they realize. You might think you're keeping the peace or staying strong, but what you're actually doing is stuffing your inner world into a tiny box and hoping the lid doesn't pop off. Jung pointed out that unexpressed thoughts and emotions don't disappear. They don't dissolve, they don't fade, and they definitely don't behave themselves. They just sink deeper, and eventually they find their way back up as heaviness, stress, or sadness. Bottling things up can look very ordinary. Telling yourself it's not worth mentioning, even when something clearly bothered you. Keeping quiet because you don't want to seem dramatic or emotional. swallowing your frustration because you don't want to start a conversation you're not in the mood for, pretending you're not disappointed because you don't want to look like you expected too much, avoiding expressing your needs because you think they're inconvenient, and because you're used to holding things in, you might not even realize how much you're carrying, but your mind and body keep score. Over time, bottling things up shows up as feeling tense for no obvious reason, being fatigued even when you're not physically tired, getting irritated easily because the pressure has no outlet, feeling down or heavy after moments when you said, "It's fine," but it wasn't. Having a constant, low-level sense of being overwhelmed. Jung's insight was simple, but powerful. When you hide too much of your inner world, you create an internal split. There's the version of you that holds everything, and the version of you that pretends everything's okay. That divide creates emotional strain, and depression can grow in that gap. You don't have to spill everything to everyone. You don't have to deliver long speeches or dramatic confessions. It can be as small as admitting something to yourself. "Yeah, that bothered me. I wish I had said something. I'm not okay with how that went. I need a minute. This is weighing on me more than I want to admit." Even that tiny acknowledgement lets some pressure out. Because the truth is, holding everything in isn't strength. It's silence. And silence eventually gets heavy. Letting yourself express even a little of what's going on inside makes you feel more whole, more grounded, and much less weighed down. The fifth thing is this: you're living in a way that doesn't match who you actually are. This is one of the most quietly draining habits, and Jung talked about it a lot. He described the persona, basically the version of yourself you show the world. It's not fake, it's just the polished, edited version that seems easier for everyone else to handle. The problem isn't having a persona. The problem starts when you spend so much time being that version of yourself that you lose track of your real needs, preferences, and limits. This can show up in subtle, everyday ways like saying yes to things you don't actually want to do because you think it's expected. Trying to look put together even when you're exhausted or overwhelmed. Acting more confident, cheerful, or relaxed than you truly feel inside. Following plans, habits, or routines that don't match your personality, but you stick to them because they seem normal. Pretending certain things don't bother you because you think you should be able to handle them easily. At first, it feels easier to keep playing the part, but over time, you start drifting away from yourself. Here's how that mismatch feeds depression. You feel tired even when you haven't done much. You feel disconnected from your own preferences, like you're not sure what you actually enjoy anymore. You start losing motivation because you're not moving toward anything that feels personally meaningful. You feel emotionally flat because you're not expressing your authentic feelings. You feel strangely empty after social interactions because you spent the whole time being the version of you that keeps the peace. When your outward life doesn't line up with your inner self, it's like wearing clothes that don't fit. Maybe you can move around in them, but it's uncomfortable in ways you can't always explain. Jung believed that a lot of emotional heaviness comes from this disconnect. Not from big events or dramatic conflicts, just from the slow erosion that happens when you keep showing a version of yourself that doesn't match who you are on the inside. You don't have to suddenly overhaul your life or be your true self in every moment. It starts small, saying no when you need to, being honest about what drains you, admitting what you actually like or dislike, letting people see a tiny bit more of the real you, checking whether your routines actually serve you or just look good on paper. Every small step toward alignment lifts a bit of the emotional weight you've been carrying, because the truth is, you can't feel whole if you're always hiding your core. Now, I want to be clear. These 5 things aren't the only reasons depression can show up. Life is complicated, and everyone's experience is different. Jung himself believed that the mind is layered and complex, and sometimes the sources of our low mood are hidden, subtle, or unique to us. Other things could be quietly weighing you down, like constant stress that never seems to let up, even from small responsibilities you think you've got under control. Poor sleep or irregular routines that leave your mind foggy and your mood fragile. Overcommitting yourself without realizing it, so every day feels like a mental juggling act. Ignoring your own interests or hobbies because you feel like you should be focusing on more practical things. Avoiding reflection on your life's direction, just drifting along without checking whether your choices actually support what you care about. Lingering regrets or unresolved decisions that keep popping back into your thoughts without you actively thinking about them. Even seemingly small habits, like scrolling endlessly on your phone, staying in spaces that make you anxious, or not taking breaks when your mind feels full, can quietly stack up. Individually, they might not feel like a problem, but together they can create a background weight that slowly drags down your mood. The takeaway here is that depression isn't usually caused by a single thing. It's rarely just one mistake or one habit. It's the accumulation of patterns over time. That's why noticing the 5 things we talked about is already a big step. It's giving you awareness of some key patterns that you can change. And being aware that there may be more factors beyond these 5 is empowering, not discouraging. It reminds you that your depression isn't a random, uncontrollable force. It has sources and triggers. And that means there are ways to respond, adjust, and gradually reduce the weight you're carrying. Even small insights, like realizing that constant stress or overcommitment is affecting your mood, can start a chain reaction of positive change. Jung's work was all about noticing the patterns in yourself, shining a light on them, and gradually bringing the hidden parts of your inner world into awareness. That's exactly what this section is encouraging: to stay curious, notice the patterns, and take small steps toward feeling lighter. Okay, so we've talked about 5 big habits that can feed depression, and that there might be even more patterns quietly weighing you down. Now let's get practical. How do you actually start lightening that load? The first thing to know is that you don't have to fix everything at once. Jung believed in small, conscious steps. It's about noticing what's going on inside you and making tiny shifts that slowly make life feel lighter. Here are some ways to start. Notice what's really going on inside. Take a few minutes each day to check in with yourself. Ask simple questions like, how am I feeling right now? Or what part of me is being ignored? Even a brief moment of honesty with yourself can take some pressure off and prevent your mind from running on autopilot. Name the things you've been avoiding. If there's a feeling, a habit, or a part of yourself you've been pushing aside, just acknowledge it. You don't have to solve it yet. You just need to notice it. Example: I've been ignoring how frustrated I feel about my workload, and it's weighing on me. Break the comparison habit. When you catch yourself comparing to someone else, pause and redirect your focus inward. Ask yourself, what would make my progress feel meaningful to me, not anyone else? Express yourself in small ways. You don't need to spill everything to anyone. Write it down, say it to yourself, or even just think it clearly in your head. A little release can take a surprising amount of weight off your mind. Align your actions with who you really are. Start noticing where your routines, habits, or commitments don't match your true needs or values. Make tiny adjustments. Say no when you need to. Choose one thing you actually enjoy, or give yourself permission to pause. Take care of the basics: sleep, movement, rest, and simple daily structure all make a bigger difference than we often realize. Jung emphasized that small, practical things in life can stabilize your mind as much as reflection does. The key idea here is progress, not perfection. Even one small check-in, one small moment of honesty, or one tiny step toward being yourself is already a victory. Jung's work reminds us that the mind responds to awareness. Once you see the patterns that are holding you down, you can start loosening their grip. So start small, be patient, and notice the difference as you slowly reclaim connection with yourself. Every little shift adds up, so you've started noticing your patterns, taking small steps, and easing some of the weight you've been carrying. That's huge. But the next question is, how do you keep that lighter feeling? Jung believed that maintaining inner balance isn't about one-time fixes. It's about consistent awareness and gentle habits that protect your peace over time. Here are some ways to do it. Check in regularly. Even after you start feeling better, don't stop noticing yourself. A quick daily check-in, asking, "How am I feeling?" or "What part of me needs attention?" keeps small problems from turning into big ones. Maintain honesty with yourself. Keep acknowledging your feelings, thoughts, and needs. Don't let them pile up again. A small moment of self-truth every day can prevent the shadow from quietly building pressure. Protect your boundaries. Learn to say no when something doesn't feel right. Guarding your time, energy, and mental space is a form of self-respect that keeps your peace intact. Stick to what aligns with you. Continue making choices that reflect your true self, not just what looks right to others. It's those little adjustments, habits, routines, commitments that create ongoing stability. Celebrate small wins. Notice the little things you do that support your mental well-being. Even small victories, like taking a pause, expressing your feelings, or avoiding unnecessary comparison, are worth acknowledging. Be patient and gentle with yourselves.